Hi guys, so today's video is going to be a part 1 for a July and August wrap up. I'm actually breaking up into different categories: books I have finished, books I've started, books I've DNF'd. I'm actually going to start with the negative and then transition into the more positive, and so I'm going to start by talking about the couple of books that I DNF'd. The first one would be Under Heaven by Guy Gavriel Kay. I usually tend to prefer more direct writing styles, and this particular style, there were more words perhaps than you needed, which I can get on board with. I was just finding that it didn't pull me into the story. If anything, it just made me feel like I was waiting until the story started. That was somewhat frustrating, but I was okay with it because I thought, if the story is really good, this will just be one of those books where the writing style maybe isn't quite my thing. But, and man, I'm not saying that it's unrealistic for characters to think about sexy time. I'm not saying that's unrealistic, but every perspective basically at the beginning was a man, and basically every one of these men was thinking about how much they wanted to do it and whether they would do it with the females that they encountered. There was a part where an assassin shows up, and this assassin is a chick, and we had one character who was like, I wouldn't sleep with her because she might hurt me, and you're like, okay. And then she goes to assassinate someone, and then that person's just like, okay, I get that you want to assassinate me, but like, don't assassinate that person. And then the chick, like, as she's getting ready to assassinate the guy, is like, but he looked at me in a disrespectful way. And then the guy who's going to be getting assassinated is like, what, he looked at you as a woman? Ah, geez, what's the big deal? I'm like, are they 12? What is going on? I was expecting this beautiful, super mature historical fantasy book, and instead I'm getting all of these fellas that, like, they need to get some. I don't know. Later, a character is like, I need to hire a well, he doesn't think he needs to hire one. He does hire a bodyguard. And this bodyguard is a woman. And then she is doing bodyguard duties by standing outside his bedroom. And he's like, it's hard to think about anything except for the fact there's a woman outside my bedroom. And I haven't done it in so long. And then he, like, thinks about this other lady that he used to bang. And then, like, the woman comes in and out of nowhere makes a comment about, don't worry, we'll be getting to the city soon. You'll be able to have a lady then. Out of nowhere. Like, literally, even the character's like, that came out of nowhere. It's as if she knows my thoughts. I forgot to mention the most aggravating part, which is that a guy decides there's a chick who's dead, and he's like, well, I better have sex with this dead chick before her body goes cold. There's like this mystical ghost wind, and the soldiers are scared of this place because they're scared of the spirits of the dead, and they see this ghost wind in action right before this chick dies. Then they decide they're gonna try to sleep with the dead chick, and the guy's like, don't do that, that's bad. And then the guy's like, fine. And then, like, that's it. There's, like, no conversations of, like, well, that was weird. I've heard great things about this author's other works. I'm not trying to write him off. I'm not even saying, like, oh, he's so sexist or anything like that. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying I just wasn't enjoying the book, so I DNF'd it, and I really want all of you to let me know who are fans of his works which one I should pick up next, and if you feel like that book is maybe not the best indication of what his other works are like. Totally switching gears. The other book that I DNF'd was A Song Willow Water. It follows these young girls that are sort of in our world, except for there are mythological creatures. It's an interesting combination of relatability. There are things like the characters go to school and they're having to deal with people they don't really like. But then also it's like, oh, this gargoyle is just like sitting on my house. All the neighbors are suspicious. There's also a lot of commentary in this story about, because the main characters are black and sirens are black, and so the kind of implications that somebody might be able to potentially woo someone with their song, it makes it so that sometimes women who are murdered, there will be interesting things like, well, was she a siren? Did she kind of force him to do it? And it's just really interesting ways of kind of dissecting society, media, those sorts of things. The reason I DNF'd it is because I was finding that the characters and the tone of the book were very young, and I just felt like it wasn't really fair for me to keep... It's like Percy Jackson. I read the first Percy Jackson book as an adult, and I didn't really care for it. It was just one of those things where it's like, how stupid would it have been for me, somebody in their 20s, to be like, this is predictable. Like, I would hope so. I'm in my 20s, and this is meant for children. But it, like, Percy Jackson was predictable for me. So in this story, I just felt like maybe things were a little heavy-handed at times. It just felt a little too young in tone for my taste. Next up, getting into the books that I have started. The first one I'm going to mention is Senlin Ascends. It doesn't feel like fantasy. It feels like literary fiction. It's kind of absurd and abstract. When I first started it, I was under the impression that it is more of a not basic, but it's like more of your traditional fantasy type of story. And it's, in my opinion, very much not that. The setup for the story is this man goes to this place that is the Tower of Babel. And he's always wanted to go to this place. It's like a Victorian steampunk setting. He goes to this place with his new wife on their honeymoon, and they get separated. Right at the beginning of the book, they get separated. And now he's trying to find her, and he's having to ascend the tower. Senlin Ascends. Best way I can describe it is if you take the movie Taken with Liam Neeson, and instead of the guy's daughter being taken, it's his wife. And instead of the character having this incredible skill set, he's the most naive tourist in the world. At first I was thinking, this character is dumb, I can't stand dumb characters, but it's not even really about that, and the purple tabs, as you can see they're increasing as the story goes on, are things that I'm like, wow, that was interesting, that was powerful. It's just a book that I think people need to write papers on, kind of a story, and I think the stupidity of the character, even that in and of itself, is a reflection of how we hold on to our ideals sometimes, even when reality so goes against them. It's just really interesting. I'm gonna find some people who have finished this book and link their reviews. I very much want to do a review when I'm done with the book, but in the meantime, if this sounds interesting, I'm gonna link some other people who have finished it and express their thoughts. The next one that I am a fair amount in, 270 pages into, would be Foundry Side by Robert Jackson Bennett. This one follows a world that is kind of merchant run. There is the area with the wealthy, and then there's the wastelands, essentially. There's this area where crime runs rampant, and that's where our main character is from. They're a thief with a mysterious past, and the magic in their world, you can program objects to think that they are other objects or to think that they have a certain function that they wouldn't otherwise have. For example, you can get a wagon to act almost like a car. Like, you don't even have to have a horse because it will just go because you've told the wheels, you move because there's wind. And they're like, wind? Okay. And then they'll move. Our main character, for some reason, can kind of touch objects and then know about their past. I actually hate this ability because it means they can't really touch anything. Even changing clothes is a huge deal. This is abnormal. The character hates it, so they're a thief and they want to make enough money to be able to have themselves fixed. That sounded like a dog. Who fixed the problem. And so we're introduced to this character, and they somehow encounter this particular object that might be able to change the coding, the scribing of these objects. This particular item shouldn't exist, but our character stumbles upon it, and then danger comes after them. Initially, when I started this book, I did feel like the main character and some of the dialogue with the main character, Sanchia, I felt it was a little youthful. The character's a little rough around the edges. It almost had like a middle schooler, not middle grade necessarily, because there's language and dark content in the story. It just didn't feel necessarily super mature, and that's okay. I love Full Metal Alchemist, and that's got tons of campy humor in it. But I was kind of hoping that this would be juxtaposed with some characters that were more serious. But I do feel like some of the dialogue is continuing to stay similar. I don't know that I am really feeling that connected to a lot of these characters. Around 270 pages in, we'll see how I end up feeling by the end of it. I'll be brief about the next two because I did not get very far into these. One of them would be Malice by John Gwynne. I'm super excited because I've heard fantastic things, and when I did start it, I really was liking it. The reason I put it down is because this is the kind of story that definitely seems like you're gonna have to really, really focus on the details, how people are connected, all the different points of view, and that was just not a story that I wanted to try to read with everything else going on in my personal life. I didn't think it would get the time and dedication that it deserved, so I decided I would put it down and pick it up later. But I will say my friends Jessie and Joshana, they have their own channels. They buddy read it and they did a live show, so I'll have that link down below. Both of them really enjoyed it, so if you are looking to hear some more in-depth thoughts for it, definitely check them out. The other one that I have picked up that I'm hoping to just kind of binge really quick would be The Thief by Megan Whalen Turner. This is a young adult fantasy that is a little bit older, and I definitely am getting that when reading this. The vibe feels more like older young adult than it does new young adult books. So I am enjoying it quite a bit. It's kind of a slower start, and it's a little more detail oriented than I think a lot of modern young adult fantasy books are. But there have been a couple times I've tabbed some parts that I found really amusing, but it's kind of dry humor. And I'm liking it. I'm liking it a lot so far. I'm not very far in, but I'm hoping to binge this, and I'm hoping I still love it. I've heard really fantastic things about this series as a whole. Now moving into books that were on my TBRs that I've read and completed. A book that is very serious, very mature, very emotionally driven that I picked up would be Between the World and Me by Ta-Nehisi Coates. This is a memoir about a man kind of discussing what it's like, what his life has been like being Black in America and growing up in an area that was very difficult to grow up in. And he's kind of framed this as almost like a letter to his son. I almost don't know how to go about talking about memoirs because they're so deeply personal, and I so appreciated how honest Ta-Nehisi Coates is in this. He discusses things that are, I mean, so many of us have really, I don't like saying dark thoughts as if there's something wrong with not constantly thinking positive, happy bunnies and puppies all the time, but some of the things that are more serious that we think, that we sometimes feel like we're not allowed to state because of how the media is going to turn it or how people are going to perceive it. He lays it all out there. He's extremely honest, and these are his experiences. I don't know how to, I don't even feel like, I feel like book reviews for memoirs are a strange concept. Like, let me rate your experience based off of my entertainment and what I got out of it. That just doesn't feel right. But this book, I think it's one of the most powerful books I've ever read. I highly recommend it. Very, very emotional. I was emotionally fragile. Like, my husband, this is a book he loved, and when he came home from work, I was like, I finished it. I read it today. And he's like, oh, what did you think? And I was like, I don't know if I can talk about it right now. It's very, very, very emotional. Very difficult to read, but also just very, very good. Next up, we have House of Dragons, and I loved this book. I loved it so much. I thought it was action-packed, fast-paced, gripping, surprisingly emotional. There was a lot of depth that I was not expecting of it. I had such a good time with it. I can't wait for the sequel. The setup for the story is that whenever the emperor or empress dies in this one kingdom, there are 5 different houses, and the eldest child from each of these houses is called, this magical thing, them and their dragons are called to compete in a competition, and whoever wins this competition becomes the new ruler, and then they then have to ensure that there's no chaos, that nobody tries to take over the throne. They then have to kill the rest of the competitors. Already a lot of high stakes. I was thinking that this was going to be kind of just like a good old action-packed time, and that would be kind of fun. I wasn't expecting it to have a ton of depth, but there was so much depth. Oh my gosh. You get to know these characters very intimately over the course of the story. I loved how different all of the point of views were, and the dragons in this book are actually in the book. There's like different culture around the dragons in the different houses. I want to let everybody know though, even though this is young adult, there are some pretty graphic, violent moments. So if you're squeamish, there's some gore in this story, but I still highly recommend it. And my friend Jade from Bedtime Bookworm, she's actually the one that made me aware about this book. She is doing a giveaway for the ARC because she had won an ARC for it before it was out. And so I will have her video linked down below where you can potentially win a copy of this book. Anyway, thanks so much for watching. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you guys later.